Everyone, welcome back.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Good to be back.
All right, so we have Jay, Corey, and Brian back. Ben will be back next week. I have a few things I want to talk about from the last episode, and some of this stuff, like actually all this stuff I put down. You have to just trust me. I didn't put it down after last night. So the first thing is, remember, we're trying to figure out a player that Jordan punked that quit the team. Well, they still haven't showed us that. I don't know if it was edited or not. But Corey Benjamin, because we came up with Corey Benjamin, and then Brian said Corey Blunt.
Mm.
Corey Benjamin was the guy post Jordan that as soon as Jordan retired, he said, he retired because he got old and he can't handle me. So he was that rookie. And then that one, y'all know the story, Corey Benjamin. You can look it up. Jordan showed up and basically whooped his ass in practice. Second thing is Space Jam. That was recorded after he came back when they first lost, that summer. In the last one, I had said that's one of the things that he had to put up with during the off season, or during the season of the stressful '92 season. But I was incorrect in that. Corey had asked a question that I completely missed until we were doing editing. You think that the Chicago Bulls would have beat Houston? And this is a good question, and we have to think about. In my opinion, I think about the way the Bulls were constructed at that time. So with Corey, the one who asked that question, and again, I apologize because I completely missed it. What are your thoughts on that, Corey? So we're talking about, that Bulls team constructed the way it was.
I actually went back and looked at some other footage about that team, and Hakeem Olajuwon was a problem. And I don't see anybody on that Bulls roster being able to contain him. He was the X factor on that team. And, they had their shooters. They had, Cassell, the Smith guy, I forgot his name,
Kenny
Kenny
Smith?
Smith, Robert Horry. So they had some shooters, and they had the way that team was constructed, they would have had a difficult time beating them, in my opinion.
Jay?
I completely disagree. I think if you would have had Rodman, he would have canceled out.
Rodman wasn't on that
Olajuwon.
team, though. He wasn't on that team.
What? Oh, you're right.
Yeah, because he
I
came in
still,
what,
I still,
95?
96. You're right, but I still think that's Houston wouldn't have been able to contain the Bulls. I think Houston caught a Knicks team. They barely beat the Knicks, so the Knicks just had some bad coaching choices. I definitely think the Bulls are a better coach, so they definitely would beat Houston.
What was that finals? Was it, you said they barely beat them? I don't know. Would it go 7 games?
Yeah, it went 7 games.
Did it?
Actually,
I didn't
the
pay
Knicks,
attention.
the Knicks should have won it. The Knicks was up 3-2 going into Game 6, but then they lost Game 6 and 7, so they blew it.
Full disclosure, I was not in a good place mentally at that time. And actually, I didn't really think about it, but that's going to be part of something coming up later. I remember them playing, but, I just was not in a good place. I was a knuckleheaded 18, 19-year-old. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I think as far as matchups go, I give it to the Bulls because although Akeem was the problem, I agree with that. I think on all of the other matchups and all the other positions on the floor, I think the Bulls had the advantage. I think that Michael and Scotty had the advantage at the 2 and at the 3. Sam Cassell was a rookie that first year, so first 2 years, goes and wins 2 championships. But at the time, I forget who the starting point guard was for the Bulls at the time. But you can't.
PJ Armstrong.
Was it BJ? BJ was a starter. Okay, because I know it's like him and John Paxson were platooning that point guard position. But I think that the Bulls would have won it eventually. But down low, Akeem, he definitely was a problem. But I think the rest of the matchups would have made up for it for the Bulls. But the other thing too, the more I thought about this, is that you saw how much they struggled in that third championship on that first three-peat. A lot of the different pressures and things that was going on at that time. So I mean, that's a variable too, I think. And so would that have mounted? What would have come out in the press at that time? Would it have affected the team, worse than it affected them, in that third championship against, the Suns in '93? But still, we don't know. But just looking at it matchup to matchup, I give it to the Bulls.
So my thought on the matter is the Houston Rockets and actually the Texas teams, we used to call it the Texas Triangle. They were always a problem for the Bulls. They'd always play the Texas Triangle just before the All-Star break. I ran the numbers, and the Bulls during their first three-peat run, because back then you didn't play the teams as many times as you do now. You know, it's like 1-1 as opposed to, opposite conference twice. The Houston Rockets were 5-1 against the Bulls during those three seasons. Now I know the regular season is a regular season, but still, I don't know. I can't sit here and say that the Bulls would have ran off 8 in a row and they would have beat Houston. That wasn't a very good Houston team, but they were good enough to win the chip on a shortened season. If you remember, Brian, we talked about it before. Your Sonics, they were the number 1 seed, and they got taken out by your boy Dikembe Mutombo and the Nuggets. Yeah, that thing won't go away with Dikembe on the ground going, and
Yep.
it's
And I've
languages.
hated Dikembe ever since.
Yeah, but I don't know. That wasn't a bad Houston team, obviously. And yeah, Olajuwon is one of the greatest ever who doesn't really get talked about as much unless you're asking Shaq. And he always names him and what's his face from the Houston Rockets, Yao Ming, as the two of the guys that he's just like, wow, those dudes were something special. Moving on. So what's one thing that surprised you the most? Because there's a lot of surprises, I think, in these 2 episodes, educational wise, whatnot. Starting with Brian, what's one thing that surprised you the most?
I touched on it during the last episode, but I was surprised that they asked the gambling question during, the part of the interview when they were talking about James Jordan's death. I didn't really think that they were going to touch on that subject very much at all. So it was pretty enlightening to just hear how everybody reacted, to the news that there was speculation that James Jordan's death might be linked to Michael Jordan's gambling habit. So I'm glad they touched on it. Of course, I didn't expect that they were going to do a very deep dive into it, but I'm glad that they addressed it. So that was a nice little surprise.
Jay, what do you got?
Well, me along those lines, I like that they went into the conspiracy. A lot of basketball fans have the conspiracy theory about Jordan being suspended for a year and a half. So I'm glad that they touched on that too. It was something different and something I would never think that Jordan even acknowledged, but it was interesting that he acknowledged it.
So do you guys believe David Stern?
Absolutely not. No.
No way. No way. No way.
I don't know. I'm watching him. I'm like, he's a politician, and Jordan was the NBA in a sense. So I don't know. I'm not going to call him out as a liar, but I just thought that was interesting. Corey, what was the thing that surprised you the most?
Well, I was gonna go for the Jordan. I mean the James Jordan, but I want to repeat that one. But the fact that they used the excuse of the media to put him in Double A. Because he's 31 years old. He hasn't played baseball since high school, and he started off really well, but then they started hitting him with these pitches, the breaking balls, and then he was unable to, his brain wasn't able to formulate that he's a basketball player, and it just didn't look right whenever they would show some of the pitfalls that he had as a baseball player. So it's kind of weird that they actually put him in Double A, and he shouldn't have been with those guys at all.
Because of there wasn't enough room for the press.
We're
going to touch on that a little bit later because Brian, I don't know about you two, but I know Brian he's probably the most diehard baseball person I know. The biggest thing that surprised me was the LaBradford Smith story. I've always heard about the LaBradford Smith story. I never knew that it was 100% made up. As far as he put his arm around me and said, "Good game." I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
I just heard about the story, but I didn't know the whole thing was made up.
Yeah. It shows how crazy Jordan is. It shows how he makes up stories in his brain.
Yeah, which we've all known, but
you always got to have some type of motivating factor, right? So they also talked about before the finals against the Sonics where George Karl was in the same place having dinner, and then he just walked right past MJ. didn't say anything. And so MJ had admitted that he used that as kind of his fuel to, start off the series like, oh, okay, we're both Tar Heels, and I thought that we were going to, exchange pleasantries, being in the same place at the same time, but I guess not. Okay. Anything to get the fire going, I guess.
Did you see the follow up on SVP?
No, I didn't see that.
So
Did
they
they
had George.
interview George Carl
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. George
Okay,
Carl
what
was
did
on
he
there,
say?
and George Carl said that absolutely happened. He was
Yeah.
advised. He was advised not to talk to Jordan because one of George Carl's assistant coaches was the assistant coach on the Pistons.
Okay.
So he said, don't even acknowledge him because he'll act like he's your friend and be all nice, and then he'll destroy you. And so it kind of went the opposite way, which is really kind of funny. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, lose, lose, lose.
I made a note that we've seen raw emotion from Michael Jordan now 4 times since his Hall of Fame speech, if you include the Hall of Fame speech. Obviously, the Hall of Fame speech is Kobe Bryant's speech, and then twice last night, when he was, talking about his father, then when he was talking about himself at the end of episode 7, and I want to dive into that a little bit. Another food for thought. You guys know the significance of George Kohler? It says that it's his best friend and his personal assistant. His story is, and they go over this on Michael Jordan's Come Fly With Me. So George is a limo driver, and his ride didn't show up at the airport, and the Bulls didn't send anybody to pick up Michael Jordan from the airport when he was a rookie. And so that's when they connected. He gave Jordan a ride, and he's been his personal chauffeur and friend ever since.
Man, right place at the right time, huh?
Yeah, loyal as fuck too. So with the James Jordan murder, 2 18-year-olds, what did you guys learn about that? I remember them covering that a lot back in the day. When that happened, it was on the news nonstop for days until they found him, and then again for days and days and days. Did you guys learn anything new about that? I know, Corey, you were very curious about it because you said it's been kind of difficult finding information on it. So we'll start with you.
Well, I didn't know that they dumped his body in the river. I thought he was still found in the car. So that was something that stuck out to me. I didn't know they had actually disposed of the body. That was one key thing that I didn't know previously.
Did it change your thoughts on anything? I'm not sure if you had any. I'm just saying.
Not really, because a lot of the stuff, like you said, they had aired it, and I do kind of remember when it happened. I do remember the car. I remember the plates when they found him. He had pulled over. It was said to be that he was sleeping, and then it was just a random act of violence. Then they start linking it to the gambling, which I think it was a low blow, very tacky. Even if it was true, he just lost his father. It just was the wrong time. And then you think about these athletes, having to go through these things publicly, and we have the luxury to kind of compartmentalize and deal with things privately, as regular people like us. But he's in the public spotlight, regardless of what you think about him. I think that was just low.
Brian?
Yeah, the detail that really caught my attention that I didn't recall was the plates being removed. Um,
Mm.
and then showing some of the footage from the old news footage of the scene where the back windshield of the car is blown out. Um, and so the thing that stuck out to me was, last week I had said that I did believe that it was tied to, something with his gambling, and I kind of still believe that, but it's it's because of this after watching last night's episodes is with those things with the license plates being gone and then the window being shot out and then disposing of his body like Corey said, it seemed like it was a very planned out act. It didn't seem very random to me, if anything. If a couple kids who randomly came across James Jordan's car, see it parked off to the side of the road and find a older gentleman sleeping inside and decide to rob him, why did they not just commit the act and just run? Why go through all of that all that effort to remove the plates, remove James Jordan from the vicinity, and then to dump him elsewhere? That seems like a lot of work and a lot of time if it was random. So it just, to me, it just, made a little bit more sense that it could have been tied to, and maybe it wasn't Jordan's gambling per se, but it just seemed a little bit more than random in my eyes.
Jay, what you got?
I kind of agree. Also, it could have been a hit. Like, sometimes the mafia could contract people out. They could have contract those 18-year-olds out to do it. Sometimes that happens, but I definitely don't think it was just a random event. It doesn't seem right. It is. Why would you just want to? If you're just gonna rob him, you'll rob him. You're not gonna kill him and then dispose of the body. To me,
Brian, you brought some good points. Sometimes shit does happen. I mean, violence is random, period. And I'm wondering if once they robbed him or whatever they did, they were like, "Oh shit, that's James Jordan, that's Michael Jordan's father."
Sure. Yeah.
Because I remember, and I could be misremembering, but I remember them kind of bragging about it and getting themselves in trouble by flashing the championship rings and shit like that in home videos. Um, when you're 18, you're dumb. Like I said when we started this whole thing, I did a lot of stupid shit when I was 18, 19, 20, and I wouldn't do anything like that, but I would think about doing shit like that. So you think about people when they're panicked, they're not sure what. When you're panicking, you're young and dumb, you're going to do the most extreme thing possible, assuming it was truly random violence. I'm not going to completely discount that it had any relation to anything somewhere else. But I mean, they would have had to have been following him because, the cell phone game wasn't very strong back then, right? Hey, I'm calling you from a payphone. There's James Jordan. He was driving a nice Lexus SC, 400, I think. I want to say it was a maroon Lexus. That was a hot car at the time. So, and I don't know. It's a good conversation point for sure.